welcome to Channel 5 News. I am Shaniqua, your host for the evening, and today we're going to talk about the different career paths for being a social worker. I just wanted to do that because it was so fun. But yes, because we are still in March, and March is Women's History Month and also Social Work Month, and I am a social worker. I thought that it was important for me to at least do one episode dedicated to just being a social worker and what that looks like and the different career options, right? I think it's also important to talk about this simply because, there are some misconceptions about being a social worker, right? People will think that, being a social worker, you don't make money. Being a social worker, you don't do this, you don't do that. And that's just the end of it. And they're like, if you want to be a social worker, you doing it because you love the work, not necessarily because you want to get paid. Baby, you could do it because you love the work, and you can do it because you want to get paid. Okay? There is money to be made in the field of social worker. You just have to know your worth. So whether you are a woman or a man, at the end of the day, social workers unite. Okay? There is different pathways. So let's talk about it, right? Again, like I said, my name is Shaniqua. I am actually an LCSW. If you're new here or if you forgot, I am an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. I am licensed in 3 states: Texas, Illinois, and Utah. Okay? That allows me to do therapy virtually across these 3 states. Okay? Before I became a therapist, I worked for the state. I think I mentioned it in a previous video. I worked for the state, DCF, in the Department of DCFS, in their whole world. I worked for their private agencies, so within the foster care sector. If you, shameless plug, follow my podcast, Why Me Please Podcast, and we talk about that Why Me Please Podcast here on YouTube and the other channels. But I worked with foster care fresh out of college. I graduated grad school in 2014, and 2015 I started my first job as a social worker for foster care through a private agency via DCFS. Okay, let me tell y'all just a little bit about that journey. When I was applying to jobs, imagine having a master's degree and people are only trying to offer you $28,000 a year. You heard what I said. My degree paper costs more than that. Okay? My degree paper costs $20,000 a year. All right? So, and I did 5 years of school to get both my bachelor's and my master's in social work. So imagine somebody telling you, we need this amount of experience and $28,000, and your salary is $28,000 a year, baby. Get somebody else to do it because it won't be me. I did eventually find another job, like I said, and it paid at least $10,000, about $10,000 more. So I was like, okay, I'll start here and I won't be here long. Okay, because I had too heard all the rumors, right? All the bad things, like, social workers. I was that person. I'm living it. Social workers don't make money. Social workers don't make money, so we're not gonna get any money up out of this. So don't expect nothing. But I knew $28,000 wasn't finna be the deal, because I could have just kept working at Starbucks, making way more than that, because I was making good money at Starbucks at that time. That's what I was working at. Okay, so what are we talking about? We're not doing that. Know your worth. Remember, I talked to y'all in the other video about knowing your worth. Know your worth. Okay, so I took the job. I started January 2015. I worked in foster care system. I did that for a few years. That was a very rewarding yet taxing job because it's so many moving parts with that. We're having to get people back, trying to reconnect families together, or not. Because sometimes they just couldn't go back home to their biological parents due to extenuating circumstances, right? Or egregious acts. It wasn't in the parents wasn't doing anything to do right, and get their kids back. So working in foster care, you've seen a lot of things, right? And some things made you cry. Yes, sometimes I cried. My feelings was hurt. Because, what are we doing here? Right? Why? Why is this like this? Why aren't these families able to reconnect? Join back together? And we had to really, as the case manager in that position, I had to really understand the person in the environment, right? Because as social workers, that's what we really focus on. The person in their environment. We call it PI, person in environment. Because what's happening here, what is happening around them that's making these things be the way they are, right? And how do we fix this? What needs to be changed? What can be added or removed, right? And so those were hard things that we had to do. So again, I was happy to be able to reconnect some families, and unfortunately some didn't, and the kids got adopted. And that was okay, but that was what was best for that child or those children at that time, right? After I did foster care, I then moved on. I stayed with that same company, and I moved on to do Intact. I was a supervisor. So this is where we work with the families as they remained inside their home. With their parent. The kids remain inside the home with their parents, and then we're giving them all these different type of resources, because we really, if you don't know much about DCFS don't really want to take anybody kids for real. They do it because they have to, because things ain't changing. I've seen a lot of parents who get chance after chance after chance after chance, but they are not doing what they're supposed to do. So what do we do next? We do what's best for the child. We always doing what's best for the child, but now what's best for that child may look like they have to be removed from their house. So with Intact, I was able to continue to work with those families as a unit and give them the resources that they needed. Make sure they had everything going hard for them, right? And most of my families were a success, with the exception of, I think I would never forget, one of them ended up having to be removed because the mother just wasn't doing nothing, right? Or the father wouldn't step up. So it was like, okay. So I did that for about a year or two, left there, and then I went and worked for the university, still with DCFS, and trained caseworkers, right? So the jobs that I had at first, I started training those individuals so that they can do those jobs. And I was in a great position to do so because I know what it's like to be in the field, right? And so I actually enjoyed that job a lot. I really did. And it was very rewarding. And I did that for about 2019 to 2022. Yeah. So that was my time frame. Also, in the midst of the pandemic, I finally passed my clinical exam and to become an LCSW, because my goal was always to get to being a therapist. So there are very different ways of being a therapist. You can be a therapist by way of social work, a therapist by way of counseling, I think psychology, psychiatrist. I feel like it's another one I'm mixing. But there's very different tracks. And to my other professions, if I got y'all things mixed up, charge it to my head, not my heart, because I do that on the regular. But it's not meant to be harmful. Anyways, so I did that. I became a therapist. I got a therapist job part-time in 2020 of October 2020 during pandemic. And so I worked both jobs at the same time. And, being a therapist in the evening and working my regular 9 to 5 throughout the day. Luckily, we was in pandemic. We work from home. Easy peasy. I can get out of one job and have an hour break and start the next job right on the computer because it was all virtual. That's why I don't understand why they want to take away these virtual options for some people, but whatever. But yes, so those were my routes of my career paths as a social worker. Okay. Now let's talk about other career paths, right? Because social worker is not a linear thing, as y'all can see. I just told y'all 3 different positions I've had as a social worker, right? And those first two roles that I mentioned, those actually kind of fall under traditional social work roles, right? Because it's case management, it's child protective services, working with child protective services, foster care, family support programs, all the other stuff. So we covered that part. And that also, did I say family support? Yes. So we covered that part. Another one is clinical social work and therapy, which is what I do now, right? We covered that part. I love being a clinical social worker and a therapist. I can do this in a private practice setting, which is what I do because I own my own private practice. I can do it in a community health setting too, right? Which also falls under medical social work, but we can come back to that in a second. And I can work for other people's private practices, or just other people nonprofit as a therapist in a clinical therapist role. Okay. The next one is a medical and healthcare social worker, right? And so these are social workers who work in hospitals, clinics, hospice care, rehabilitation centers, they help patients and family navigate medical crisis, access resources, and cope with those life-changing diagnoses, medical diagnosis and whatnot. So if you are passionate about being in the healthcare setting, you can still be a social worker in the healthcare setting and it works. I remember that I used to swear up and down like I wanted to be a hospital social worker because it's like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's a fast pace, it's moving fast. I'll get so many different experiences. We get to do different things and every day is going to be like a new day. Unfortunately, I just never got a job. Like I applied, but they didn't want your girl. Okay, they didn't want me, and that's simply because I didn't have hospital experience. All of my experience had been within the child welfare system, which was the things I told you guys about in the beginning with DCFS. That's child welfare. So I never got it. I live vicariously through my friends who have been in the hospital settings. Like I said, if you guys go check out our podcast, Why Me Please podcast, we have an episode with one of my good girlfriends on there, Cassandra, who's also a clinical social worker and does work in a hospital setting, and she loves it. One of the other hosts, Dominique, that's on there, she also has worked in hospice as a social worker, and she actually loved it. And so there's just a lot of different options, right? Another pathway that you can take is a school social worker and youth services, right? That's why I used to want to be a school social worker. When I tell y'all, I used to want to try everything out. I just knew I was going to try everything out, but it just wasn't working out. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing that, right? So if you love working with children and teens and you want to do it in a school setting, that could be really good for you, because in a school setting, you're advocating for the students, right? You're advocating for their needs, their well-being. You're addressing those behavior and emotional challenges, and providing crucial support to the family and educators. Because guess what? Sometimes when kids are at school and they're acting out, right? And the teachers think, oh, they just don't want to do their work. No, the babies are stressed sometimes, okay? Their home environment is affecting their school life to a certain extent. They ain't doing none of their work because they too busy trying to figure out how I'm going to do A and B once I leave school, because my mama or my dad has to be here or at work, or it's too much noise in my household or background, or I'm in an unsafe environment, especially if you are working in an urban area, inner city areas, right? It's all these things. And so as a school social worker, you get to help them navigate some of those things and help the educators understand, like, okay, these things are affecting this child in this way. And so then you get to also connect with the family too, hopefully, if they, are responsive. Okay, sorry about that. My camera had cut off. Battery died. I didn't pay attention. But like I was saying, being in a school setting is very helpful, because it allows you to be able to help those child and help everybody understand, what outside factors are affecting these students, and this is what we need to do for them, right? So it's just another way of being a great person, right? So if school social work is your thing, go for it. I didn't do it because I would have had to go back to school to get a very specific certification, and I just was not doing it. I was done. I was like, I'm done. I'll kiss that dream goodbye, right? And then the other one is macro social work. So this is where you're working in advocacy, policy, and community work. So, not all social workers work directly with clients, and that is okay. And many of them or us focus on big picture change. So if you're passionate about like social justice, policies, community organizing, macro social work allows you to impact the system through advocacy, research, program development, and government agencies. You could really help shape different policies and improve lives on a larger scale when you're doing macro work, social work. Okay, so that's definitely an option. I know some people, and I'm sure you guys have known people that work in that level of social work, right? Corporate and nonprofit agencies. We talked about nonprofit social work, which is what I did in the very beginning. But like some corporate work, of course, working in human resources. I know a couple of social workers that's like in human resources, and baby, they getting paid. Okay. Getting paid. Okay. Employee assistance programs. So that's those EAP programs. If you ever really looked and your job has an EAP program, it could be a social worker that's working within that program. What else? Some other things are like grant writing in the nonprofit sector, because you know what's needed, you know how to advocate, all the other good stuff. Forensic and criminal social work. So, working within the legal system. I know some social workers who works with the police department as a forensic social worker. And that could be your calling, you can work in the prisons. I've had a friend that worked in the prisons before, rehabilitation programs, victim advocacy, or even just within the court systems. You can do it. It's so many things you can do as a social worker. And of course, entrepreneurship, as I am in social work and innovation. So just being very creative and carve out your own path as a social worker. You can also be a professor if you want to and go teach social work classes. So there's so many options when it comes to social work. So don't let anybody tell you that, oh, you can only do this type of social work or that. No, there's so many options and you can get paid. And I'm making it very clear about the getting paid part, because I want to break that stigma in that narrative that, oh, social workers don't make no money. Social workers make money. You just got to know where the money is, and you got to know your worth, and you got to know to negotiate your price. It's okay to start at entry-level positions, but get your experience and continue to move up and move around so that you can get the dollar amount that you know you are worth. We go to school to get a lot of education. There's no reason why our degree should continue to cost more than what they're trying to pay us on a yearly salary basis, right? Hence, that's why I work for myself. I have my own private practice. There is money to be made in social work. You can be a successful, financially stable social worker if you want to be. Don't let nobody tell you otherwise. Okay? So again, I'm going to close this out. The beauty of social work is that it is not a one-size-fits-all. That is very important. There's so many career paths, and you can even create your own career path as long as it's legal and it makes sense. All right? And you don't never have to be stuck in one role. You can try it out. You can go back to school and get a certification if you need it, if a different path is requiring a certain thing. There are options out here, and I want you to be able to build your skill set and know that you can do this. You got this. So go out and have fun. Be the best social worker you can be. And if you're not a social worker, you just wanted to tune in and enjoy the video, I greatly appreciate you. Treat someone that you know who's a social worker to some Starbucks, a dinner, a good old time, whatever the case may be. And with that being said, please like, subscribe, and share my YouTube video, my channel. I enjoy you all for coming out. I enjoy you all for tuning in, and I will see you all next time. Bye.